afternoon, everyone, and happy Thursday. You have Alyssa Corum and Ken Shreve here with a look at the stock market today. We're going to take a look at the bit of roller coaster ride type action that we saw in the market today, as well as a couple of stocks that issued their quarterly earnings reports and saw some interesting reactions to that. Ken, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, great earnings from Apple, sort of a disappointing price performance for the stock, but Facebook also great numbers and a very bullish gain for the social network. We'll also take a look at leaderboard stock Century Communities, which also had strong Q1 results.
Okay, great. Well, first, let's take a look at the major indexes. Here's a look at the Nasdaq, which closed up about 0.2% for the day. We had the S&P 500 and Dow up 0.7% for the day, and the Russell down about 0.4%. So the Nasdaq underperforming here, but just look at that bar here, an outside day. This morning, the gap up looked really great. Then we were hit with a downside reversal, but recouping some of those losses, turning back into positive territory by the end of the day, which was nice, but a lot going on underneath the surface and headlines hitting the market left and right, it seemed.
Yeah, I mean, mostly a lot of disappointing reaction to some high-profile earnings reports, and to see the Nasdaq, it closed slightly higher, but well off its highs. At last check, I think volume was going to be higher than what we saw Wednesday. So if we do, it looks like the Nasdaq is kind of right in the middle of its intraday range where it closed. But if it did close in the bottom half, it's possible that we could see a stalling session, which would add a distribution day to the count. But we'll just take a look at the big picture column later today and see if it eventually is a stalling session. So, not a horrendous day for the market. The Nasdaq is basically just testing support at its 10-day moving average. We're in a confirmed uptrend, and again, we saw a lot of strong aftermarket gains on earnings yesterday, and some very strong pre-market gains. And then just like that, a lot of stocks turned negative, and Apple, I think, managed to eke out a small gain. We'll talk about that first, I guess.
Yeah, let's take a look at Apple, ticker AAPL, with a strong quarterly report. A lot of the companies that we've been following pretty closely here can continuing to show acceleration on both the top and bottom lines. So we were able to see that for Apple. Earnings up about 120%, sales up 54%, nice acceleration there. But as you mentioned, not the best stock reaction there, and it looks like Apple closed roughly flat for the day. This chart is slightly delayed, so maybe slightly higher, but not the reaction that you want to see on a quarter like Apple had.
Yeah, well, I mean, iPhone sales were up huge, up 66% year over year. Their Mac sales were up 70%. So we're really talking big numbers. So was a bit surprised to see Apple not able to hold on to gains. You can see it actually broke out nicely over a 135.63 cup with handle buy point. It did that with a very weak relative strength line. We talk a lot about a stock's relative strength line. The strongest breakouts are going to have RS lines up near highs or shooting into new high ground. So Apple isn't even close to fitting the bill there. Also a weak relative strength rating, but you got to give Apple credit. It was an outstanding quarter, and it's not a broken stock by any means, but a little disappointed that it wasn't able to stage a bona fide technical breakout in heavy volume today. There were clearly sellers in the Nasdaq, and definitely sellers in Apple stock today.
Sure. And even though this stock isn't broken, with this move coming in heavy volume today, what kind of action would you want to see if and when Apple does reclaim that buy point? It seems like you would want to see heavy volume convincingly to the upside if it tries to retest the buy point.
Yeah, there were. I mean, the heavy volume today definitely showed you that there were some institutional sellers in the stock today. So it was a little disconcerting to see the stock reverse off its highs. But Apple is a strong enough stock and probably has good enough support out there where I would expect it to hold support at its 21-day exponential moving average. That's the green line right here. And then if it breaks that, obviously that would open up a trip down to the 50-day moving average. But I think the results were good enough where I'd expect if the market can hold itself together here, Apple will just kind of pause and just move sideways from here, hold support at the 21-day line, and then, frankly, the high of today is the nearest level of resistance. So we'll watch the stock for a move over today's intraday high.
And FANG stock, Facebook, ticker FB, worth discussing as well today, with a gap up on its quarterly report, up over 7% today, above average turnover. Once again, acceleration on both the top and bottom lines for Facebook. And nice to see this big cap tech stock in the social media space really start perking up, because the leadership in the mega cap techs seems like it had really shifted over to Google, to Microsoft, but Facebook really coming out here powerfully with this earnings reaction.
Yeah, and you can see the results down at the bottom of the MarketSmith chart here. A nice acceleration in revenue. I think it was up 48% year over year, and earnings up 93%. And this was a stock that held gains. Facebook at one point had, fallen off highs. It never turned negative, but it had fallen off its highs. It was a stock also that was in buy range. It was testing the 300 level ahead of today's report. But I would say the gap above this recent high here of 315.88, I think that was an actionable pivot point. And based on that alternate entry, and looking at its its weekly chart here, it's still not a bad area where you could even start a little small position. So the numbers were very good. I mean, Facebook is a lot more than just a social network at this point. They're really making inroads in e-commerce. Their marketplace business has now, I think, more than 1 billion active daily users, and they're doing a lot of incentivizing for a lot of Instagram creators to spur them to put more good content on Instagram. So Facebook has a lot going on besides just being a social network, and I think the stock looks really great here.
Yeah, a great point that you make about how it was able to hold all the gains. Essentially, by the end of the day, we really love seeing stocks close in the upper half of their range. So to see this kind of power, I think, on a day where there was a little bit of a roller coaster ride for the broad market, is a definite sign of strength there.
Yeah, and I think as Facebook came down to its 200-day moving average several weeks ago, you can see there were several above average volume price gains as the stock started to work its way higher. So what Facebook had going for it headed into its earnings report was an accumulation distribution rating of A-. So, unlike Apple, this was a stock that was showing pretty good signs of accumulation ahead of today's earnings report, and certainly with today's big percentage gain and in very strong volume, there were big buyers in the stock again today.
We like to see it. And also CCS is an interesting stock to take a look at, with a strong gain of 13%. Heavy turnover here as well. Strong quarterly report. Am I sounding a little redundant here, Ken? No, acceleration on the top and bottom lines for Century Communities, as you mentioned. A leaderboard name in the building residential commercial industry group, ranked 68 out of the 197 groups that we track, Ken. So how do you treat a name like this in terms of maybe adding a little bit more to an existing position?
Well, we did exactly that for leaderboard today, and I want to just take you back to when the stock gapped up over the 50 level. Yep, right there. That was a nice breakout in heavy volume. That was also fueled by strong earnings. And then look at what the stock did after that. It pulled down, hit a low of 51.95. Then it rallied back, and then it pulled back down to close to its 50-day moving average, hit a low of 55.02, rallied back, and then pulled down to its 50-day line again. So this is exactly what happens when an ascending base forms. You get 3 pullbacks after a breakout, and if you go to the weekly chart, you'll see these 3 pullbacks as well. It's really just a good visual example of what an ascending base looks like. Breakouts are not always guaranteed to work from ascending bases, but when you have a very bullish earnings report, this was certainly a breakout that worked well, and we took the opportunity to increase the position on on leaderboard. So just a classic breakout from an ascending base. And again, what fuels a stock's price performance? Great fundamentals. And when you look at on the weekly chart, you look at recent earnings and sales at Century Communities, and they've really been producing outstanding results. And to see that revenue growth in Q1 accelerate materially from Q4, generally a stock is going to be rewarded when you see a big pickup in growth like that.
That's right. The fundamentals and the technicals combined, and a breakout from a strong chart pattern. What's not to like there?
Yeah, and they also gave bullish sales guidance for this year, so it was sort of a perfect storm for Century. Yep.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow morning on IBD Live to round up the week, because we have even still more quarterly reports coming out after the close right now, including Amazon, which I think had a nice report there. So we're going to have all the details for you on investors.com here this afternoon, but also more in-depth analysis tomorrow morning on IBD Live of stock moves on earnings out tonight, as well as how the week shook out. So we'll see you there, investors.com/IBD Live. Thanks, Ken, for your analysis, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Facebook's moving nicely.